Welcome, and let's open with a word of prayer. Dear God of heaven and earth, we thank you for the bit of more mild temperatures that we have been having here, or some of us are, at least. And just thank you for the safety on the highways and the byways for those of us that are commuting various places. And as we pause midweek, those midpoints that are so important in prophecy as well as in our own experience. We just ask that you will grace us with your presence. Be with me, give me clarity as we just unpack various things, and we just ask that you'll bless each of us and be with those that have not been able to join in. Lateness of time zones and just various factors weigh in with that. And so we just ask that you'll be with them as well. In Jesus' precious and holy name, amen. Okay, I'm going to begin, but I'll start off probably with sharing screen right at the outset and take it from there. Sometimes awkward doing the flipping back and forth, and I've got to find a little more efficient way, I think. Not to mention just being able to not have it, at least in PowerPoint, advance the screens forward so quickly and out of sync. Anyway, our midweek study, we do appreciate the time together, and now that we're doing it bi-weekly, it is in some cases a little less pressured for those who at times they're taking turns doing the presenting, but I'm going to highlight a couple of I'll say omissions or corrections and additions maybe in terms of the previous study. Well, I'll actually say even two studies, but first we're going to highlight a quotation that we're all familiar with. And let's see if it comes up. Yes, okay. So this is from Review and Herald, October 12th, 1905. So in our Adventist brains, we can sort of think back to some of the history that has been going on, turn of the century, and some of the disasters that struck within Adventism and some of the crises that hit in terms of, well, I'll just say apostasy, let's put it simply. And so this passage is written in a sense sort of on the heels of some of those various events in Adventist history. Our God is a God of order. Everything connected with heaven is in perfect order. Subjection and thorough discipline mark the movements of the angelic host. And that's actually the opening paragraph. And then lots of paragraphs, and then it continues down to the end. Let none entertain the thought, however, that we can dispense with organization. It has cost us much study and many prayers for wisdom that we know God has answered to erect this structure. It has been built up by their, God's direction, through much sacrifice and conflict. Let none of our members be so deceived as to attempt to tear it down. For you will thus bring in a condition of things that you do not dream of. In the name of the Lord, I declare to you that it is to stand, strengthened, established, and settled. At God's command, go forward. We advanced when the difficulties to be surmounted made the advance seem impossible. We know how much it has cost to work out God's plans in the past, which has made us as a people what we are. That then let everyone be exceedingly careful not to unsettle minds in regard to those things that God has ordained for our prosperity and success in advancing their cause, their work. The work is soon to close. The members of the church militant who have proved faithful will become the church triumphant. In reviewing our past history, having traveled over every step of advance to our present standing, I can say, praise God. As I see what God has wrought, I am filled with astonishment and with confidence in Christ as leader. We have nothing to fear for the future, except as we shall forget the way the Lord has led us and their teaching in our past history. And so I'm going to, right now, I'll keep up the PowerPoint, but I'm just going to mention, you'll be able to see it on screen in a bit, but a correction from actually the very first part of the study that I have taken on for the midweek study, dealing with Elder Terrie's part 1 study from May 30th, 2024 on Acts 27 and Sunday law. And in the beginning, I am pretty sure that I, for the line of the ship of Alexandria, ended up, and even I think I changed it on the whiteboard originally, but I had said, as well as possibly diagrammed on the whiteboard, Daniel 7 and 8, but it actually is, and Elder Terrie was correct, it is actually Daniel 8 and 9. And so I just wanted to make sure that that was corrected into the public record. It was a big deal in a sense. And that's it. I was going to add some other things, but I know time sneaks by so quickly, so I think I'm actually going to end up leaving that. And we'll just go to a little bit of review from last week's study that I titled it. I mean, it still is sort of, in a sense, the part 2. I didn't put the same title, just further thoughts on Sunday law. We didn't really unpack too much in reference to Elder Terrie's study, but having been on the heels of some of Elder Perminder's study, I did bring some of that in a little bit. And we did talk about, well, the line of the 144,000 and then the 3 fractal lines we spoke about just fairly briefly. And then did do the pattern, the repeating pattern for each dispensation, and moved more to the events of 2014 that Elder Terrie highlights, particularly 3, dealing mainly to do with the U.S. government, as obviously we're looking at the 5th line, the line of the institutions. And then I did incorporate a little bit from Elder Parminter's study, but it progressed further, obviously, because it was sort of in the middle of the week, and then you had another camp meeting. So down at the bottom there, talking about angels, messengers, and what doesn't show on this board is the messenger with a message became the second component, and the flock, all of the memberships ended up being the third one. And there was some comparing and contrasting that was being done with the situation in 2012 with the rejection of a message and bringing it into our current dispensation, and then a compare and contrast with 2014 and the date, and I'll say date, that Elder Terrie had been presenting as a theory of the Sunday law, her date being July 18th, 2024. But I mean, it was an interesting noting that, 2014 to 2024 definitely is a 10-year stretch. But we could also look at 2015 and some of what it has held. 2014 being the Sunday law, though, was the big point of reference. I'm wondering if 2024 thereby also is the Sunday law. And that was still the question, when is the Sunday law? And then probably you can't see it, and I'm not going to make it larger just for this bit of reviewing, but July 18th, 2024 passed. November 5th, the American election passed. January 20th, 2025, now passed by 2 days worth. And hitting the ground running was definitely, they had a full day, including the whatever regimental ball or whatever they call it up into the evening. But January 20th, the inauguration of Donald Trump in his second presidential term. And then obviously the other option, or it could be options, would be another date altogether that is still yet future. And I believe that's more the theory that Aryan had presented in his studies. But I want to zero in on, for a moment, that repeating pattern, and just consider, we're not going to unpack it much because I'm going to move on to other things, and we're not going to nail anything down necessarily, but not everybody was present with either the last study or some of the discussion that was initiated from some of what was presented in that study, and particularly after the recording, after the study had formally finished. So, anyway, we have repeating patterns, and Nora, not to put you on the spot, you don't have to answer if you're not comfortable, but what is one of the repeating patterns that you have become familiar with, if any, up to this point in time?
I don't think I'm clear on that.
Okay, that's fair enough. You're just, well, earlier I mentioned the word kindergarten, the way I feel
Yes.
sometimes, but that's it. You're being fast-tracked as a priest, so you're allowed to pass on some questions at this point. Anyone else? Annabelle, I'll toss it your way. Good friend of Nora's that you are. What's a repeating pattern? Or not, what is it? Sorry,
Well-
give an example of a repeating pattern.
Like there's the agricultural model, the plowing, the early rain, the latter rain, and the harvest.
Okay, I would put that more in terms of it's one of the models that we can use for gleaning information, extracting information when we look at different models. Another model would be a construction model, and we utilize that a fair amount, a little bit more so back in time with the various kings and the constructing of the temple and some of the history there and the decrees and all of that kind of history, which I know for one I'd certainly have to review again if I was going to ever speak really intelligently on it. But so we have an agricultural model, we have a construction model, we had the model of marriage that was utilized. I believe there's a fourth one that it's not just quite coming to my mind, but those are more models as opposed to a repeating pattern within a model, just simply because that model describes dispensations. Within a model, there can be a repeating pattern.
Well, we have
But-
Boston, Concord, Exeter.
Okay, so that's one of the repeating patterns. Boston, Concord, Exeter. And one of the other repeating patterns, and they are a little different in a sense, but similar, because it is based a little bit on the points that are wanting to be extracted, or the threaded theme, the thread that's being threaded through the needles, the waymarks, the eyes of the needle in a dispensation. But I've designated it as, I can't remember if we ever really did put it different ways. Message unsealed was sort of the unsealing of the message. I decided to choose the unsealing of the message, to put we want to speak and pause and say a lot in our own public speaking, but unsealing of a message is standing for. And then an increase of knowledge, and then a formalization. And we'll come to the last waymark in a moment. So they, in some respects, parallel Boston, Concord, Exeter, and then that final waymark. So
Debbie, I have a
Yes.
question. In
Yes.
this model, it's not the 5 fingers, right? Because it's only 4 fingers. The plowing, early rain, latter rain, harvest one has the 5 fingers, right?
Yes, and it's interesting. This morning I was just thinking, I should draw the hand of God up on my little bit of space there. And I had the thought, and it went right out of my head. So I consequently didn't do it. Anyway, what we're
Excuse
talking
me?
about right now, Nora. Oh,
Excuse me, please.
yes, go ahead, Nora.
Now, I think I just heard Annabelle say that the plowing, the agriculture model is 5 fingers, but I only see 4, so I don't understand.
Yes, and Nora, I'll quickly explain. That's what I was just going to, and I'm sorry I didn't diagram it, and I don't have space on the whiteboard behind me to turn
Okay.
to it right now. If I was a little more clever on technology, I could actually bring up an image, but I won't chance that at this point.
Nora?
So use your
Yes.
imagination.
If you write out plowing, early rain, latter rain, harvest with lines, waymarks between, that's 4 spaces.
I see.
But
I
it
see it.
makes 5 lines.
I see it. Thank you.
Okay,
And Nora, that's what on the diagram here that I do have, and it may be a little bit small on your
Yes, I
device.
saw it as she was telling me. Thanks,
That's
Debbie.
right. The 5 waymarks that are from Great Controversy, I believe it's chapter 39, 38, 39, in there. 1989, we know about the Sunday Law from Spirit of Prophecy, the close of probation, the second advent. The 2001 waymark, only our movement produces. On Millerite history, on the one line of Millerite history, it would represent April 19th, 1844. On the other line, that in a sense the two waymarks combined together, but it's the fall of the Ottoman Empire, so it's August 11th, 1840, that second waymark is. And so they come down together and produce a second waymark that, depending what point is being made, generally it'll be the April 19th, 1844 date that's used for that second waymark. And then, as Annabelle just said, it's the spaces between. If you hold your hand out in front of you and you see the 5 fingers, and we're equating this with the 5 fingers of God, God's hand. The 5 fingers are the 5 waymarks: 1989, thumb; 2001, Sunday Law; close of probation, second advent. And as Annabelle said, the spaces between become the dispensations of time, the periods of time, ages. Ellen White uses different words interchangeably. We've pretty well maintained dispensation as the word we're wanting to use, because it is prophetic and it is accurate and not heresy to refer to them as dispensations. Anyway, the model, oh, pardon me. It did slip 2 PowerPoint slides along. The model that I wanted to just mention quickly, I've termed it Model A, just not to be confused with the agricultural model and other models like that, but this is, I'm just going to call it Model A. And it's based on Elder Tess's studies over time in many ways. And much as we had the messaging where she spoke about the unsealing of a message, and back in that time, if you remember, she drew a straight line along here, parallel with the big line, but then eventually it got changed because we realized the increase of knowledge, information is increasing, developing, getting tweaked, and even beyond, we end up in many cases looking back and learning more and unpacking more, and so before reaching that formalization, there was a lot of information that was made available to us and that we could come to understand better and better over time. But the Boston Concord Exeter example that she used, and it equated with Millerite history, as well as American history and the history of the revolutions, which I'm not going to go into either of those right at the moment. But the term Boston Concord Exeter, and then the word that she used was test. Boston Concord Exeter test. And we were familiar with term shut door, which both Elder Tess and Elder Parminder used. And it was, I think back in the early day, we did actually use close of probation. But then I think we sort of, and that's why I put it in quotation marks, a kind of close of probation. And we'll look just for a moment, and this is jumping down a little, perhaps for you, Nora, from where you've gotten to in your studies. But if we look at the fractal of the priests, so, oh, sorry, I don't have, that's on the other diagram. Well, actually, I could go back. The fractal of the priests goes from time of the end, 1989 to 2021. Most. And as opposed to the Levites and the Nethinim are they each started their journey one dispensation later. And that's why with the line of the Nethinim, we're up to on the big line of the 144,000, they're harvesting, which would be their close of probation to the second advent. On the big line, the line of the 144,000, is actually the dispensation that we, depending on your perspective, either have entered into or are just about to enter into Sunday law to the close of probation. The latter rain period, as you referenced earlier, Annabelle, for the 144,000. But if we look at the line of the priests, the close of probation, and I know you can't see it, I'm sorry, I should have, whoops, the line of the priests, close of probation, where harvesting happens, is 2019 for the close of probation, and the second advent was 2021. So that 2019 close of probation, we actually had a specific date for it. Annabelle, do you remember what date we had? And I'm asking you for a reason. What was the close of probation for the priests on the priest fractal line?
Close of probation, November 9?
Yes, November 9th. November 9th, 2019. And Nora, you'll learn about, there is a whole history of all sorts of November 9th. And anyway, I won't go there. And that was actually the Sabbath that Annabelle and I both of us together, were baptized, with a few others in attendance, and it was just a lovely ceremony. But at any rate, so if you look at the line during the latter rain for the priests, that third dispensation, which runs from 2014, which would be the Sunday law on the priest line, to 2019, which would have been the date, because it's close of probation, it would have been the date November 9th, 2019. But as it turns out, we also came to realize that things can be a point in time as well as a period of time. And so we didn't, November 9th, 2019, even in terms of the movement internally, but certainly externally, there wasn't anything, there wasn't any big change. Elder Parminder warned us, so we would know it ahead of time and so on, that we wouldn't really observe anything too much of note. And that was sort of more what did happen. Anyway, coming back to this model, the Model A, Boston, Concord, Exeter, and as I say, elder Tess using the term test, and often ended up explaining it using words like at that Exeter waymark was when an individual would sit a test. Also perhaps could be worded in different words, writing a test. And then what ended up being used by Elder Tess was the phrasing, hand in. You hand in your paper. And the word could be submit, right? And so that was a pattern that we had, and in a sense, I thought that I understood it. Maka, how? And I don't want to put you on the spot either. So if you don't want to answer, pass over to somebody else. But Maka, how would you? How would you explain what you understood being the Boston, Concord, Exeter test? Or as I say, okay, thanks, Maka. Maka's not able to speak right now, so anybody want to weigh in your understanding of that? As I say, I've labeled this version Model A, but your understanding of that model.
My understanding was that the test was at the end of the dispensation, but at Exeter,
Yes.
when it's at the formalization, which would be Exeter, formalization of the message is set, and that's the time that you have to come to grips with it and make up your own mind how you're going to deal with it. Are you going to accept it and cherish it and make the necessary changes, or are you not? And it doesn't have to happen immediately. You have till the end of the dispensation, but it's at that point that I can see where you understood that to be sort of the test, because the test is there, and how are we going to decide from there on in?
Okay, Annabelle. And so the accepting and rejecting of the message is, here I've put down decision fixed. At the third waymark, the decision would be fixed. Not like you've already, by the formalization, had observances of opportunities, listening to messages, fellowshipping, studying yourself, etc., with whatever the message was that was unsealed at the beginning of the dispensation, that was going to be tested upon, because it's the message for that dispensation that gets tested on. And through the increase of knowledge and so on, to the formalization. So you understood it to mean that that decision is not set at that third way mark, that you have time, and it's at that final way mark for the dispensation that you are tested.
Right.
Okay.
But
want to go
like you
back to-
say, the decision is pretty much made at the third way mark.
Okay, I want to go back to this other slide for a moment, just to, and you probably can't see it too well, but in Elder Terrie's study, she brings this out as well, and I had mentioned it the last time. Really, there are three groups, and accept and cherish the light, reject the light, the second group, or accept but don't cherish the light. In other words, you're careless with the message God gave. And we know, I mean, just thinking in terms of students in school, if they know they have a test coming up and they choose not to do their homework or not to study for the actual test, it's a little more challenging to pass the test than if you apply yourself and do some testing. Okay, so I'm going to put up the Model B. Whoops, not the app. The Model B for a moment. And because in a sense, Annabelle, I think this is more perhaps what you were describing as you understood it. And that is that a decision is made, but the decision is not fixed. And this actually is where the test is. But it's not fixed, because that, as you said, the formalization of the message has been set. There isn't going to be any more, I'll say, tweaking of it or adjusting of it. Like there aren't any errors in the message at that point, but instead you're having to decide. But it's a progressive span here, and I continued the dotted line along. Decision developing, firming up, you're settling in, either accepting or rejecting the message. And so therefore this period of time goes from the test to the shut door, to the close of probation. And only those who go on to the next dispensation, if we're working down through time here, would be those who have, and I'll use the term passed the test. They enter into the next dispensation, whereas it's at this shut door, and Ellen White wrote about in Millwright history, shut door. They had some misunderstandings a little bit originally, but and that was a shut door for the priests in 2019. Only those who went on to the harvest phase from 2019 to 2021 as priests were those only the ones who had accepted the message and walked in the light. Okay, I want to go back to the Model A for a moment, because the last question I'll ask on this, and as I say, we're not going to nail anything down, just using this more as a review of one aspect that was in the last study, but in life, and I'll use school whether it's university or elementary school or middle school or secondary school or high school. When one writes a test, the most normal circumstance surrounding that test, what is it? Nora, a student, I mean, you've got grandchildren, as do I. What happens when a student writes a test? The teacher will say, you're going to have a test on Friday, we'll just say. Okay, gives a date, time. It'll be in the last thing in the day, or whatever it happens to be. And then what happens on that test day? Like, what actually happens with a test? Nora? I'm not sure if you did hear me. Nora, are you hearing me? We were
Yes,
talking
I'm
about that
hearing you.
earlier. Oh, you are. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I mean, it's not a trick question. I just was wanting you to elaborate in terms of what happens with a student of whatever age writing a test.
Do you mean on the day of the test?
Right, on the day of the test, what happens?
Well,
They
you
enter the classroom and
and sit in a chair and take your pencil and write on a paper, and
okay,
you put
and then
your what you understand the answer to be on the paper, and if you don't know, then you leave it blank. Like that.
Mm-hmm. And do you keep the test?
Oh, no, you don't. You hand it in to the
You hand it in to the teacher,
person testing.
right?
Usually a teacher.
Adjudicator or whatever, yes, in university, but yes, the test gets handed in. Is that on the same day, or do you have that test for another couple of days and then you
Well,
can hand it in?
if it's not an open book test, it must be turned in before you leave that classroom.
Mm-hmm. And even honestly, for most open book exams, which generally are often harder, I mean, you have access to textbooks and your notes and so on with an open book test. But at the same time, the test period, you write your test, fill in your answers to the best of your ability, write your essay and paragraphs and whatever, and then you hand the test in. You don't necessarily, sometimes, and there are some situations where a teacher may end up sending a test paper home with the students and allow them time. And I think that's very, very rare. And I think in more modern time with AI and just all sorts of things, not many teachers are now going to be doing that scenario at all with any test. But the general normal way of a test is to have a sit down, have the papers handed out, you fill in your answers, you turn in your paper, and you exit. So the only reason I was bringing that in, and I say this is ending us off on this, is simply because the real world model for a test is not that a test occurs here, that we sit or write, and then some time passing, a test gets handed in. And therefore, there's, just a little bit of sorting out, certainly for each of us, but I know it was something for me as well, that I have to just revisit.
But
And
Debby,
sometimes misunderstanding what has been said by either of our angels, Elder Tess or Elder Arminder, is often where the disconnect happens. Go ahead, Annabelle.
and yet, aren't we tested in our spiritual lives, like every step of our spiritual growth? Doesn't Ellen White say that? That it's how we respond, how we react, daily.
Amen, Annabelle, and that's a very good point. And even in terms of the, as soon as a message is unsealed, right away, the
Debbie,
testing begins. We're being tested on how we're responding to that message right from the very beginning. So yes, I agree 100%. Go ahead, Nora.
I was just thinking about the Hunger Games on TV, and I don't know much about them because I don't like that kind of thing, but I've just seen a little bit, and I don't know if I'm even correct, but it seems like it goes over more than one day. And they have all these things they have to accomplish, and they go so far, and then they go on further another time. I'm wondering if our test isn't more like that, where we are tested similar to a physical test like that, but we're tested spiritually over a period of time, a few days, and we have maybe different parts to our test in that time.
Well, and Nora, I will add a few other examples of that kind of thing. I mean, there are biathletes, triathletes, iron person athletes doing, I mean, there's all different grades of distances and so on. Some of them are just, I mean, incredible. And they're doing it over weeks and weeks and weeks, the competing. And even some of the ones that are over several days are not necessarily a lot of rest time, like it's not quite 24/7, but almost in a sense. And so there are examples of what you're describing, separate to Hunger Games, even I'm not familiar with it very much. But so anyway, it was just, I am not going to answer wherein lies the correct, because I know I had it understood one way, and I'm not sure that the way I had understood it was correct, is correct, and I'm having to rethink things and so on. But I wanted to do it as two different models, because in a sense, sorting out and whether it is a period of time and there's progression, and having decisions fixed, and yet there's still some time, and then you hand in your paper. It may not fully be exactly what was being meant. In essence, one of the earlier studies by Elder Tess, she said it both ways. In a sense, you could interpret it both ways, both model A as well as model B. So that's it. I have to, I know for myself, revisit it and come to a better understanding. Does anyone else want to weigh in, offer anything? Katja, I don't know if you have any desire to add anything or the opportunity to right now? Yeah, she's multitasking, so I'm not going to put her on the spot. Okay, so we want to move on. The Acts 27 is the place where Elder Terrie does the does some review in the first study that she does, and it ends up being actually fairly brief. And so I wanted to go through and do a little bit more of my own restudying of some of the things. Not sure necessarily we're going to do that much in depth tonight either, but this is one of the maps, and you can see the route tracing there. And I'm going to put up another map. This one highlights a little bit more the actual place names that we particularly focus on in the story of Paul. His story starts in Acts there in Jerusalem, Acts 25. His speaking to Felix and to Festus, that are the ones that represent the state, and then Agrippa in actually Caesarea rather, and on he enters onto the ship Alexandria in Adramyttium. Sorry, getting my ships mixed up. Adramyttium in Caesarea, and it travels onwards. And so I'm going to see the next slide. I wanted to. Yes, okay. So not readable, and in part I did a not so wise thing, putting the Pyrrhus history down underneath the Acts 27, 28 history. But at any rate, I'll stop the share for a moment and instead bring up hopefully something that we'll be able to see a little bit more easily and just unpack it. Now, is that a little more readable? Need to do it this way. Yeah, just put a mark on it. But Annabelle, are you able to see that? I'm not sure. Are you on your iPad or on your phone? Can you see that?
On your board?
Yes. Is it readable?
No. It doesn't expand out for me. Yep.
Well, I enlarged it. I enlarged it on the screen. Did it not enlarge for you?
Okay, before you enlarged it, I was able to expand it out, but now I can't.
Oh, you could.
Right.
Okay, when it was the smaller one.
Right.
Okay,
But
well, maybe that's the better way to do it. Is this readable? Even if you can't expand it, is it readable enough for?
Yes, I just grabbed my magnifying glass and I can follow. Yes.
Well, how about for anyone else?
Where's the magnifying glass?
Yeah, I was gonna say, well, I mean, I can zoom in more, but I don't know. So Annabelle, what you were saying is actually when it was on the PowerPoint screen, you could actually zoom in
Right, a little,
yourself. Oh, okay. A little bit. Oh,
that's okay. After you post it, I can do it.
well, that's it. Well, see, this is what this is. This is, oh boy, getting to do these things. This is the the photograph, if you like. Did that make it a little bit better?
Didn't really change it.
Isn't that interesting?
Did
Huh.
you just do something?
I just zoomed in more.
May I ask what
Yeah.
you zooming in on your board work?
No, I'm zooming in on a photograph of the board work.
Oh, I don't see no photograph of any kind. I just see you and your board behind you. And nothing's changing.
Oh, is that right? Okay, so it's not sharing it. Thank you, Ally. That is very important. Okay,
Oh.
so that's what it is. Okay, so you're just, because I stopped the screen share. Ha ha ha. Oh boy. So let me share again and then I'll bring it up as
Oh, beautiful.
there you go. Okay, sorry, Allie. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Sally.
Something as simple as just sharing the screen, Debbie. Okay. Anyway, so I did zoom in an extra time. So now probably even if you were on your phone, in which Maka might be, hopefully she can still see it. Anyway, let's just review a little bit.
Debbie?
And yes, sorry, go ahead, Nora.
When you showed the map last, was that the bad ship journey, or was that the first ship or second ship?
It's the total with both ships,
Okay,
all the way, the whole trip, all the way to Rome.
okay,
So it combines, it's the full journey because this is Paul's fourth missionary journey. And one of the things I was going
right.
to review a little
I
is
understand now. Yeah,
the number 4.
I get
Okay.
it.
Okay. So Caesarea, and time of the end, we equate it with, and why that's where Paul has opportunity to speak to Felix first, also Festus, and they represent the state, so to speak, because they're the Roman they're affiliated with Rome. So we use Festus and Felix to represent symbolically the USA. And that's in Acts 24 and 25. All of that story, a lot of very interesting details. I've reread it a few times actually over the last year and a half or so. But Paul also ends up having opportunity to speak with Agrippa and his wife Bernice, and he has Jewish roots, so ends up representing the Seventh-day Adventist Church. He also is the 4th generation. As I say, I wasn't going to do a full study on Acts 27 this evening, but just wanted to more review some of the highlights. But that number 4, Nora, just there are a lot of number 4s that have entered our movement's history. The book of Joel, it was sort of one of the early ones that started opening up the number 4, but at any rate, Agrippa is a fourth generation. His various father, grandfather, and etc. And so that's the each of the three, Felix, Festus, and Agrippa, being given a first angel's message in essence by Paul. So it's a life and death message. And in their cases, thou almost convinces me to become a Christian, Paul, but they all turn away. They, in essence, turn away. And there is also highlighted there because Felix originally was the procurator in Jerusalem, but then he's replaced with Festus. So there's a change of leadership that's noted. And when we come to American politics and George H.W. Bush, or pardon me, Reagan giving leadership, the presidency, over to George H.W. Bush in a 2-year period. Anyway, sorry, I'm bogging down a wee bit. We'll move over. Do that. Do it this way to Sidon. And it's to do with fishing, catching fish. Oh, and I should have mentioned at the very beginning. Get it back there easily. Adramyttium, the name of the ship itself, and we refer to it as the bad ship, meaning abide in death. So it's alive, but it's dead. And Elder Terrie brings out how this first line, I guess remember there are 2 lines, 2 ships, 2 parables. Anyway, this first line is dealing with things new. So it's brought it into our history, and it's dealing with the closing scenes, Daniel 11 and Daniel 12. So it is current, but the ship or the place Sidon sees a tarrying in Acts 27, beginning of Acts 27, there's a tarrying and a time of refreshing. So we know that signifies the sprinkling, the early rain starting to fall. And Sidon can also be spelled in Old Testament times. It was Sidon, Z-I-D-O-N as well. And there's in that time, Sidon is the 4th generation from Noah. So that's another 4 that enters in. But at any rate, there's a combining of, and I'll just use our terminology we're familiar with, the beast, the dragon, and the false prophet. So that there's a connection there with Sidon being a false prophet. Anyway, moving on to Cyprus, and this would be equating to on the line of the 144,000, 2021. Pardon me. Said that incorrectly. On the line of the 144,000. This is the 5th line, the line of the institution. So at any rate, Panium, but it's cypress. It's from the original word kittim, which I'll just mention as an aside, the CH in Old Testament words, Aramaic, and anyway, the CH often is pronounced K, like a hard sound, CH. So it's kittim with a K or kittim with a CH, ITTIM. It's like the word carob. Often it gets said cherub or cherubim, but it actually is the way it would have been pronounced would have been carob. And the IM is the plural ending, so they never would have said cherubs or cherubs. They would have said cherubim, because the IM is the plural, like adding an S. So like Nethanim. Nethanim is the plural. It's already been pluralized. Anyway, the cypress is means fair, and it is the I was almost going to say I should maybe go back to the map, but where they have the story of Elimas, the false prophet that became in Acts 13, became what you could call an external false prophet. And Simon Magus, similarly with Balaam in Old Testament time, but Simon Magus is more an internal false prophet. And there is another connection with the fourth generation from Noah. But this is where I'm actually going to take it back to can I do that easily? I think I can. Let me just see. Go to the map. Just get out of the enlarged version. Okay, so the Cypress, here we go. The contrary winds, well, actually, I'll make the comment. The fair was equating with living testimony. I mean, an ensign being lifted up was phrasing that we used way back as well. But at any rate, living testimony. And it's in these waters, the Sea of Cilicia and Pamphylia, that there are the contrary winds that continue until further waters. So Cilicia means that which overturns. That which overturns. And
And Cilicia isn't on the map, or on Elder Terry's drawings. So,
no, it's the number 4. Number 4 here.
so where is Cilicia? Cilicia, is it right after Panium and Cyprus?
Actually, let me go to the other map because it is, I think, has a little bit more detail. Yeah, Pamphylia. Sorry, Annabelle. Cilicia is here. On that other map, it's put in at number 4, but at any rate, Cilicia is here along the coastline in Pamphylia. So as Paul is journeying on here, and you can see a narrowing of the waters and so on. So contrary winds coming, contrary winds coming that end up continuing and brings it to the journey to Myra here. And so Myra and Lycia, and Myra means myrtle, which from myrrh, can be very bitter. And they did the distilling in drops, myrrh is actually a very, very thick oil, very viscose. And very, very bitter. It can be used actually to help. Well, yeah, I won't go into that. Sorry. So, and this doesn't get awkward. I'll just say that it equates in that line of Adramyttium, the ship, the first ship. It equates with the Sunday law, and something that I wanted to show. So I'll go back to, let's see, let's get out of that. Bring back this was, so the journeying from Cyprus, the large island there that we saw on the map, and through those narrower waters where there's the contrary winds, and then coming to Myra and Lycia, ends up that that's the time period when we are currently in, where we're seeing the 6th kingdom. My mouse, there it is. 6th kingdom dropping down, and the 7th kingdom rising, and we equate that with the USA. The 6th kingdom and the 7th kingdom of Bible prophecy is the glorious land, the United States, and it was a lamb-like, spoke lamb-like, and was a lamb-like nation, the Republican horn and the Protestant horn of a two-horned country. And instead it becomes speaking like a dragon, or a dragon-like. And it also shows, because it's the line of the institutions, United States and the SDA church. So it also is showing how the Adventist corporate body, not individuals, but the corporate body church, has fallen and is going downwards at the same time that our movement, 144,000, are rising up. And that will be, in a sense, I'll say completed at the Sunday Law, but I will definitely explain that neither institution, what we're terming an institution, the United States of America and the SDA Church, neither institution disappear. It's like the King of the South, representing, being symbolic of Russia. The death of the King of the South, Russia doesn't disappear, but things change. And that's the same in this thread of the institutions. The United States doesn't disappear, but it changes and becomes very authoritarian and dragon-like. And the same thing with the church, the religious side of things, the internal. Seventh-day Adventist Church doesn't disappear, doesn't go away, but it's the church militant and the seventh kingdom, which is represented by the seventh kingdom. Our movement of the 144,000 represents the church triumphant. There we go. Okay. You know, I'm feeling like this is going very slowly, and I'm sorry. I just, this is just going to be a little review, really. Anyway, maybe I'm going into too much detail a little bit. So the good ship, Alexandria, and it means protector or defender of the people. And this is obviously the second ship that Elder Terrie is bringing out as representing, you know, this is a journey. So it represents the things old that equate with Daniel 8 and 9. So it's the history that we look back to that informs our present as well as our future. So Daniel 8 and 9. And thereby looking back, it's things old, we go to Millerite history. And time of the end becomes 1798 in their history, as we know. And again, is at the point going to be made the second waymark that equates with our 2001 or 9/11 becomes 1844. And I explained a little bit earlier how depending which aspect you're looking at with Millerite history, that second waymark can be August 11th, 1840, which was an empowerment of the first angel's message. First angel's message arriving in 1798 here, but the empowerment of this first angel's message occurring on one line at August 11th, 1844, when there was a real impetus when they the public even realized that the reckoning of years of the Millerites was being proven to be correct, because it came down to the very day that it had been predicted that the Ottoman Empire would fall.
And you
August
meant
11th,
1840, right?
1840. Thank you.
Right.
Did I say 1940? Sorry.
You said
thank you.
1844.
Oh, did I say? Oh, pardon me.
Yeah.
So August 11th, 1840. Thank you, Annabelle. Yes. And, but also April 19th, 1844, that was when the time period having expired and then using the Jewish calendar, another extra month was added on for the Passover to be had that year. So it came down to April 19th, 1844 was the end of the prophetic period that they had been looking for Christ to come, and it was determined that the day for a year principle allowed things to be taken into the year 1844, and then it was through their midnight cry happening July 21st, Boston, when Samuel Snow preached, and the midnight cry that occurred in August at the Exeter camp meeting. There was a Concord in between, Boston, Concord, Exeter in their history. But at any rate, the second waymark is on the line of the institutions, stated as referencing 1844 in Millerite history. In 1863, and that's Myra and Lycia. 1863, when the third chart actually was made, and it was had no explanations on it. It did have some words, but it didn't have any explanations. And Habakkuk 2 verses 1 through 4, it talks about that they'll be speaking, and instead they had on that other chart that if I remember correctly, James White was behind putting together or having it put together. They had a little booklet that accompanied the chart, but it wasn't like the 1843 chart and the 1850 charts, where it was all, in essence, on the charts, all the dates, all the reckonings, all the prophetic periods, and so on. So, bringing in some of the Acts of the or Acts 27 information. Lycia means wolfish, and it means whiteness as well. The what ripening grain, kind of whiteness when you see it glistening in the sunlight, golden wheat, and the sun just catching it with the light where it actually looks silverish, and so on. So and so Nidus, contrary winds, and this is now on the map where they're under Crete. So they're under Crete, and they go through Salmoni and Lycia, get to, I should have mentioned Nidus up here, and get to Fair Havens, and that's where, of course, not to proceed is the message Paul gives, but the captain doesn't listen, and they do end up going on, and that's when they end up with the winds of Euroclide going off course. And for 2 weeks, and then and that's where they end up undergirding the ship, and the south wind that had been blowing changes to the east wind that are the contrary winds. And that brings us through in our history that Raphia and Panium, and the history of Islam, the east wind represented there. And let me just, okay, so the Samoni means surge on the shore, so like a big wave billowing in, or we could say overflowing. Okay, and Lucia means wise, also thick, and they end up, this is all the Adriatic Sea where the east wind is blowing, more open water, as you can see, and it is a tempestuous time. They lighten the ship and undergird it with the strapping under the hull of the Alexandria. Okay, and after the 2 weeks, they end up sounding, and that's where the measurements come in that give us the 2520 as well. One of the other symbols. 1 fathom equals 72 inches, 20 fathoms equals 1,440 inches, 15 fathoms equals 1,080 inches, which all adds up to 2520. But it's as they're sounding,
Debby?
approaching. Yes, Nora.
Would you repeat that about the measurements that you just gave?
Okay. This is a fathom. So 1 fathom is 6 feet in depth. And so as the ship is, they hear the sound of a shore, and they want to know how far. And so what they're doing is they're dropping sort of like a plumb line, but I mean it's not an anchor, but they're dropping a weight over the side of the ship tied to a rope, and they're sounding to find out how deep the water is. And initially it's 20 fathoms, and then it diminishes down as the ship is being blown in the winds and closer to this shoreline. It's in the dark. This is now the 14th day, which also is significant, but at any rate, so they're sounding as they get closer and closer to the shore. And so they're dropping it down. And so the measurement 20 fathoms. And so if we equate that to our imperial measurement, equating it with inches, that's 72 inches. Or we could say 6 feet, and then, or pardon me, 20 fathoms is 1,440 inches. And then they do another sounding, and it's 15 fathoms. And so that's 1,080 inches. And then eventually they're at the shoreline, and that's 72 inches. And so those three measurements added together gives a hidden, if you like a parable. It's hidden, not lying on the surface, but a symbol of 2520. And that's it. There are
I didn't understand the third measurement. I maybe missed something in the story. Was there a third measurement after 15 fathoms? I remember 20 fathoms and 15
20 and
fathoms.
15. Well, 1 fathom is equal to the 6 feet. So at the shoreline, when you're a little bit out, because remember the ship eventually breaks up, right? And so in a sense they're almost at the shore, because they all swim ashore. So that last 1 fathom, if you like, is when they have grounded, or just coming up to being grounded. So that's the 72 inches one. I can look more into it, Nora, because honestly, I've sort of forgotten myself a little bit.
Thank
I
you.
didn't actually
That's very
review that,
helpful.
but yes, I mean, there are 2520s tucked a variety of places in that can be, if one is digging for them, they're there, but they're not necessarily lying on the surface, even in Spirit of Prophecy, or in some of the scriptures even. But it's the stories, and the story of Acts 27 is so profound and contains so much that weighs in on a lot of different stories. But
So
anyway,
just one
sorry,
more
go
question
ahead.
to clarify.
Yes,
So 15 fathoms is 1,080 feet or inches?
inches.
Inches. Okay, thank you
And
very
20 fathoms you got? The
yeah.
1440 inches.
That's 20 feet?
You know,
I mean 20 fathoms?
yeah.
Okay.
Actually, I'm looking at somebody else's chart here, just as I'm adding that up. That
It's
doesn't add up
just that
correctly.
after my
Nora,
Bible,
I'm glad you asked that, because I am going to double check that, because actually I don't, on this chart that I was using.
after my Bible study with
No, you know what it
Aaron
is?
today.
Sorry. And I had this in my own notes and I forgot. Sorry, Nora. No, it's the 1440 and the 1080 that end up adding up to the 2520.
Okay.
My math, I was throwing you up.
That's okay.
The 1 fathom equals 72 inches is simply just to indicate what a fathom actually equates to. So 1 fathom, and it's nautical language, right? That's how they do measure on the ocean. So 1 fathom is 72 inches. So
Okay.
2520 comes from their 2 soundings of 15 fathoms and 20 fathoms. So forgive
Okay,
me.
thank you.
I,
I really wanted to understand that because today after my Bible study with Aaron,
yes,
he sent me something he had written a while ago, and at the very end it said something about the fathoms, and I wanted the answer. And I didn't know how to
there
get,
you go.
so now you just gave
Okay.
me the answer.
There you go. Well, and that's it. Well, and it's tied with the Old Testament sanctuary services as well. And we won't go into that now, but Nora, the Gira, the Omar and the Gira, and with the sanctuary services and so on. And as I say, there's 25/20s because one of the biggest accusations, both in Millerite history, which is why in their history, the 25/20 appears on the 1843 chart, what gets referenced as the 1843 chart, and the 1850 chart. But it was removed from the false chart, if you like, the 1863 chart, because by that point, James White himself actually had withdrawn from the teaching that they all had understood. And he said that the 25/20, much as in modern Adventism, the 25/20 isn't a time prophecy. It's an adverbial reference, meaning getting greater and greater and greater in intensity, like the curses from Leviticus. And so he pretty much withdrew from the 25/20, sadly. But at the same time, the 25/20 can be found in a variety of different places in scripture, and even also in terms of spirit of prophecy. And it's interesting, I hadn't known myself as a Seventh-day Adventist, but it's interesting. William Miller actually discovered the 25/20 first, the prophecy dealing with the 7 times of Leviticus 26, because as he read through the Bible from Genesis on, he came to Leviticus before he came to Daniel and the 2300 year prophecy. Well, 2300 day it is, but we know a day for a year. So yeah, fascinating history that we've gone through. And I think I'm going to actually end it all there because we've gone probably overtime, yes. And as I say, I feel that I've been almost like pulling teeth or something. I feel that I've been struggling quite a bit, and that's it. Maybe it's just a part of just this sense of being bogged down that I've been having for a few weeks. Anyway, I'm gonna have the closing prayer and stop the recording, and then we'll end up having a little bit of discussion or just closing because our night has gone by. Anyway, so let's pray. Oops. Dear gracious, loving God, we thank you so much for the depth and the detail with which you have traced this earth's history. Daniel cut to the chase in the history of Alexander the Great and getting to the 4 remaining generals, the Diadochi, in the Wars of Succession, when it originally had several men all vying for supremacy. And we're so grateful that you give us the simple structures, but you also move us to the far more complex. And the complexity can overwhelm us. And even today, with some of the current events as they're unfolding, the intensity, just this 2-day period, well, almost 3 days, really. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, since Donald Trump has assumed the presidency. Just all that has happened and will continue to happen. And so, Lord, we want to be grounded in truth and come to understand the structure, the simple, but also as it expands into greater detail and has applications for us. Reason why we look at all of these things, all of these histories, all of the different stories and so on, is so that we will be informed for just this time in the Earth's history as we're transitioning Sunday law to close of probation, and then eventually close of probation to the second advent. So as often pastors end up saying, we're down in the toenails of the toes of Nebuchadnezzar's image. And we want to understand, and we want to be able to do the work you would have us do. Cooperating with you for the work being done in our own hearts. We want to be amongst the 144,000. And we want to have that experience that they have of unity, of at-one-ment with you. And so we ask for you to continue to be with each one of us, to bless us, to fortify us, to strengthen us, to help us understand, and to be used of you in the time that is remaining on this earth. Bless us now in Jesus' name, for his sake. Amen.
Thank you, Debbie.